The forest at midnight was a labyrinth of tangled roots and whispering leaves, a place where even the shadows held their breath. For Seraphina it was a hunting ground, but tonight she was the prey. Her silk gown, the color of spilled wine, was torn and muddied. Her breath came in ragged gasps, a stark contrast to the silent grace of her kind. The scent of her own blood, a sweet, cloying perfume from a silver-inflicted wound on her arm, was a beacon to her pursuers. She broke through the tree-line, her desperate flight leading her to the edge of a vast, moon-drenched lake. The water, a sheet of polished obsidian, reflected the full moon, a silent, watchful eye in the star-strewn sky. There was nowhere left to run. Her hunters, 3 hulking werewolves in their monstrous forms, emerged from the shadows, their eyes glowing with a predatory fire, their snarls echoing in the still night air. The leader, a brute with fur the color of scorched earth, took a step forward, saliva dripping from its fangs. But before they could pounce, a new sound pierced the air. A deeper, more commanding howl that silenced the others. From the opposite side of the shore, a lone figure emerged. He was in his human form, a breathtaking display of raw, untamed power. Tall and broad-shouldered, with eyes that held the ferocity of a winter storm. His dark hair was whipped by the wind, and his bare chest, crisscrossed with old scars, seemed carved from moonstone. This was Kaelan, the lone alpha of the Black Moon Pack, an exile by his own decree. His voice was a deep, rumbling command that rolled across the water. "She is not yours to claim." The 3 werewolves snarled, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in their glowing eyes. They knew of him. Every lycanthrope in the territory knew of the alpha who walked alone. "Leave." Kaelan's voice was not a request but an unbreakable law. A low growl rumbled in his chest, a promise of violence that made the very air tremble. The werewolves, after a tense standoff, reluctantly retreated, melting back into the darkness of the forest, leaving Seraphina alone with her unlikely savior. She clutched her bleeding arm, her voice a seductive yet wary purr. An alpha protecting a vampire. The world must be ending. Kaelan's stormy eyes locked onto hers. He could smell her blood, a scent that should have repulsed him, but instead, it mingled with the intoxicating aroma of night-blooming jasmine and something else, something uniquely her. It was a scent that called to the beast within him, not with hatred, but with a primal, inexplicable pull. "What are you doing in my territory, leech?" "I was simply enjoying the moonlight," she countered, her crimson lips curving into a faint, knowing smile. "Until your rabid brethren decided to interrupt my solitude." The air between them crackled with a tension that was thicker than the midnight fog rolling off the lake. It was a dangerous cocktail of ancient animosity and a raw, undeniable chemistry. He saw the vulnerability beneath her defiant gaze. She saw the untamed wilderness in his eyes that mirrored her own outcast heart. "The silver, it's poisoning you," he stated, his voice a low growl. "I am well aware," she replied, a slight waver in her voice. He moved before he could stop himself. In 2 long strides he closed the distance between them. His hand, calloused and warm, reached for her arm. The moment his skin touched hers, a jolt, hot and electric, shot through them both. For Seraphina, his touch was a fire that did not burn, a warmth her cold skin had not felt in centuries. For Kaelan, her skin was like cool silk, and the shock of their connection was a punch to the gut. The beast inside him roared, not with aggression, but with a possessive instinct he had never felt for anyone, let alone a vampire. He ripped a strip of fabric from his own trousers, his knuckles brushing her skin as he gently but firmly wrapped the makeshift bandage around her wound. His head was bowed, his focus entirely on his task, and Seraphina found herself staring at the strong column of his throat, a pulse beating a wild, irresistible rhythm just beneath the skin. Chapter 2. A Fragile Truce. Sound of heavy footsteps, a crackling fireplace and the gentle clink of glass. He led her, not without a tense silence, to a secluded cabin hidden deep within the ancient pines. The interior was rustic and starkly masculine, heavy wood furniture, the scent of cedar and wood smoke, a fire already roaring in a stone hearth. It was a den, the lair of a predator. And yet, for the first time in a very long time, Seraphina felt a strange sense of sanctuary. He pushed her gently into a worn leather armchair by the fire and wordlessly began to treat her wound. He moved with an economy of motion, his large hands surprisingly gentle as he cleaned away the blood with a damp cloth. The proximity was a sweet torture for them both. Every time his fingers brushed against her skin, the same electric current arced between them. She watched him from beneath her lashes, her head tilted. "Why are you helping me, werewolf?" He didn't look up from his task. "The poison will kill you. I don't want the stench of a dead vampire fouling my lake." She laughed, a low melodic sound that seemed out of place in the rustic cabin. "Always so charming. I am Seraphina. You may as well know the name of the woman whose life you are so begrudgingly saving." He finally met her gaze, his eyes intense. "Kaelan. And I haven't saved you. I've merely postponed the inevitable. You're kind and mine. We are not meant for truces." "Perhaps," she whispered, her gaze dropping to his lips. "We are meant for something else." The air grew heavy, thick with unspoken thoughts. He finished bandaging her arm, his touch lingering for a fraction of a second too long. He stood abruptly and walked to a small chest in the corner, retrieving a medical blood bag. He tossed it into her lap. "You're weak," he stated gruffly. "Drink." Seraphina stared at the bag. To feed in front of him, a werewolf, an alpha, it was an act of profound vulnerability. It was also an act of incredible intimacy. She hesitated for only a moment before her thirst won out. She pierced the bag with a fong, the metallic scent of life filling her senses. As she drank, she kept her eyes locked on his. She watched him watch her, his jaw tight, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. He was fighting a battle with himself, his control strained as he witnessed the life, the color, the vitality returning to her. The predator in him was not repulsed. It was captivating. When she finished, a single perfect drop of crimson clung to her lower lip. Slowly, deliberately, she licked it away, her eyes never leaving his. It was a thank you, a challenge, and an invitation all at once. And in the stormy depths of the alpha's eyes, she saw the challenge accepted. Chapter 3. Whispers in the Shadows. As if summoned by the tension inside the cabin, a storm broke with sudden fury. Rain lashed against the roof and windows, isolating them completely from the outside world. The fire crackled and spat, casting dancing shadows that made the small space feel even more intimate, more charged. Seraphina sat, feeling the strength return to her limbs. She watched Kaelan as he stood by the window, staring out into the tempest, his broad back a rigid wall of muscle. He was everything she had been taught to hate, a creature of primal rage and uncontrollable instinct. Yet he had shown her a grudging kindness, a fierce protectiveness. It was a contradiction that fascinated her, drawing her in against her better judgment. She felt a flicker of hope, a warmth in the frozen wasteland of her heart, and it terrified her more than any hunter. Kaelan could feel her gaze on him like a physical touch. The storm outside was a pale imitation of the one raging within him. Her scent, that impossible intoxicating blend of night flowers and ancient blood, had permeated his home, his senses, his very being. He had built this solitary life as a penance, a fortress to keep the world out after a past tragedy had stolen everything from him. He had vowed to never again allow anyone to breach his walls. But this vampire queen, she wasn't just breaching them, she was threatening to shatter them completely. He turned from the window, his expression grim. "Those werewolves hunting you, they were running with vampires. That's not a common alliance." Seraphina's expression hardened. "I defied an elder. A tyrant named Malachi who believes a queen's place is as a decorative, submissive fool on his arm. He has offered a great bounty for my return, and he is not picky about who collects it." As she spoke, Kaelan moved to add another log to the fire. The space was small, and as he bent, his arm brushed against hers. The contact, brief as it was, sent another jolt of white-hot energy through them. They both froze, their breath catching. He was so close she could feel the heat radiating from his skin, see the flicker of the firelight reflected in his eyes. Kaelan's head snapped up. His entire body went rigid, a deep, warning growl vibrating in his chest. He moved to the window, his powerful frame blocking the view as he peered into the rain-swept darkness. "We're not alone," he growled, the words a chilling promise of violence. "They found us." Chapter 4. A Dance of Tooth and Claw. The scent of wet fur and cold, dead malice hit Kaelan an instant before the cabin door splintered inward. Two of the werewolves from the lake shore burst through, but this time they were accompanied by a pair of vampires, their eyes glowing like malevolent red coals in the gloom. "Stay behind me," Kaelan commanded, his voice already losing its human timbre as he shoved Seraphina behind him. His transformation was not a thing of magic but of raw, brutal nature. It was a symphony of cracking bones and tearing flesh. His form expanded, his spine elongating, fur the color of midnight sprouting from his skin. In heartbeats the man was gone and in his place stood a wolf. But he was no mere wolf. He was a monster of legend, a dire wolf larger than any of the others, his eyes now blazing with the fury of the storm. Sound of a ferocious roar and the beginning of a chaotic fight. He met the first werewolf head-on, a blur of black fur and flashing teeth. The cabin became a whirlwind of violence. Furniture splintered, bodies slammed against the walls. Kaelan was a force of nature, a singular embodiment of alpha power, fighting with a brutal efficiency that was both terrifying and magnificent to behold. Watching from the corner, Seraphina felt something shift within her. Her heart, a long dormant muscle, pounded a fierce, protective rhythm against her ribs. She saw the werewolves, his own kind, attacking him without hesitation. She saw him defending her, a vampire, with a loyalty that defied 1,000 years of hatred. He was not just fighting for his territory. He was fighting for her. She was no damsel in distress. While Kaelan was occupied with the two lycanthropes, one of the enemy vampires saw his chance. He moved with supernatural speed, a black streak in the firelight, his fangs extended as he lunged for Seraphina. He never reached her. Seraphina moved with a speed that made him look stationary. In a blink she was no longer cowering but standing tall, her own eyes blazing with a regal fury that had laid armies to waste. Her fangs, longer and sharper than the male's, descended. She met his attack not with fear, but with the cold, precise grace of a queen. There was a sickening crunch, a brief gurgle, and the vampire fell, already dissolving into a pile of black ash before he hit the floor. At that exact moment, Kaelan threw the last werewolf through the shattered remains of the door and out into the storm. He shifted back, his human form appearing amidst a swirl of primal energy. He was breathing heavily, his bare chest slick with rain and splattered with blood. He turned, his wild eyes finding her. He saw her standing over the ashes of her attacker, her lips stained with the black blood of the vampire, a fierce and terrible beauty. Their eyes met across the destroyed room. Two apex predators, equals, bound by the savage violence they had just unleashed together. And in that moment, the ancient rivalry was burned away by the heat of something far more dangerous. A raw, untamable and utterly undeniable desire. Chapter 5. The Burning Calm. The fury of the fight ebbed away, leaving a humming silence in its wake. The storm outside had broken, its rage spent, softening to a gentle, cleansing rain. The air inside the cabin was thick with the metallic tang of blood, the ozone of spent energy, and an electric tension that was more potent than any storm. Kaelan and Seraphina stood amidst the wreckage, their chests rising and falling in unison. The battle had stripped away every pretense, every layer of animosity, leaving only the raw, magnetic core of the connection between them. He took a step into the cabin, his bare feet silent on the wood floor. He stalked towards her, his movements slow, deliberate, his eyes never leaving hers. The predatory grace was still there, but now it was focused entirely on her. He didn't stop until he stood inches away, the heat from his body a palpable wave that washed over her cold skin. He reached up, his calloused thumb coming to rest on her cheek, gently wiping away a fleck of ash. His touch was a brand, a claim. "You are full of surprises," he murmured, his voice a low, gravelly thing that vibrated through her entire being. "As are you." "Alpha," she breathed, her title for him now laced with a new meaning, a note of respect and something deeper, something akin to awe. His gaze dropped to her mouth, to the lips still stained from her kill. He saw no monster. He saw a queen in her full, savage glory. And he wanted her more than he had ever wanted his next breath. He could feel the wild, untamed power humming just beneath his skin, his heartbeat a war drum calling to the ancient, sleeping parts of her soul. She could smell the rain and the blood on him, a primal perfume that spoke of his strength, his dominance, and the shocking protection he had offered her. He lowered his head, his lips hovering a hair's breadth from hers. The tension was a living thing, a coiled serpent ready to strike. The world narrowed to this single point, this unbearable, delicious moment of anticipation. "Tell me to stop," he whispered, his voice hoarse with a need that shredded his control. A shudder went through her. Her eyes fluttered closed. "I can't," she confessed, the words a surrender and a demand. He closed the final inch. The first touch of their lips was not gentle. It was a collision. It was a starving man finding sustenance, a dying woman finding a reason to live. It was fire and ice, shadow and moonlight, a desperate, hungry claim that shattered centuries of hate in a single cataclysmic moment. His hands tangled in her hair, pulling her closer, while her fingers dug into the hard muscle of his arms. The kiss deepened, full of the battle's rage, a desperate shared loneliness and a terrifying soul-deep sense of coming home. It was a promise of ruin and a prayer for salvation all at once. Chapter 6. The Aftermath and a Shared Dawn. The kiss did not end so much as it transformed. The initial ravenous hunger subsided, replaced by a profound, soul-deep exploration. It was a kiss of discovery, of questions asked and answered without words. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathless, their foreheads resting against each other. The chaos of the wrecked cabin seemed to fade into the background, leaving only the sanctuary of their shared space. His hands, which had held her with such fierce possession, now gently cupped her face, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones as if memorizing her features. Kaelan, voice rough, laced with disbelief. "What is this? What are you doing to me?" Seraphina, whispering, her voice trembling slightly. "I think I am feeling what you are feeling." A terrifying, impossible hope. A fragile truce settled between them, more intimate than any treaty signed in blood. He retrieved the cloth and water again, and this time she did not protest as he gently dabbed at a small cut on her temple from the fight. She, in turn, took the cloth from him, her cool fingers brushing against his as she carefully cleaned a scratch on his jaw. This simple act of tending to each other's wounds was a new language for them. It spoke of care, of a shared vulnerability that neither had shown another soul in centuries. They sat before the fire, not touching, but separated by a mere breath of air that hummed with energy. "Kaelan, you fought like a valkyrie. I have never seen a vampire defend their own ground with such ferocity. Most of your kind are schemers hiding behind thralls and politics." "Seraphina, I was a queen long before Malachi tried to make me his puppet. I learned to fight in wars your people have forgotten. And I have heard tales of the lone alpha, the exile. They say you are a monster, a ghost. They do not speak of the honor that drives you. Why did you leave your pack?" Kaelan stared into the flames, his expression hardening as ghosts of the past flickered in his eyes. "Kaelan, honor had nothing to do with it. Was it a penance? For a failure? A promise I couldn't keep?" Before she could press him, he turned the question back on her, his gaze sharp. "Kaelan, what about you? What kind of freedom does a queen of an ancient line seek in the muddy forests of my territory?" "Seraphina, the freedom to breathe. To choose. My line is old, yes, but its traditions are a gilded cage. I want to feel the rain on my skin without it being a prelude to an assassination. I want to feel anything other than the cold emptiness of immortality." They talked through the night as the storm gave way to the quiet dark before dawn. They spoke of loneliness, of power, of the burdens they carried. Two ancient beings, an alpha and a queen, discovering they were both just exiles, searching for a place to belong. As the first pale fingers of dawn light crept through the broken door, Kaelan stood and offered her his hand. He led her to a small, windowless room in the back of the cabin, the darkest and most secure place. It was his own sleeping quarters. "Kaelan, you will be safe from the sun here. Rest." "Seraphina, and you?" "Kaelan, I will stand guard. Dawn is my watch." She hesitated at the threshold, then reached out, her fingers lightly touching the center of his chest, right over his heart. "Seraphina, thank you, Kaelan." He simply nodded, his throat too tight for words. He watched her retreat into the shadows of his room, his scent, his space, now shared. And as the sun rose over the broken world, Kaelan stood his watch, a lone sentinel guarding not just a vampire, but a fragile, terrifying new reason for his own existence. Chapter 7. A Hunt for Two. Dusk fell the next evening, painting the sky in hues of bruised purple and blood orange. Seraphina emerged from the cabin's darkness, fully restored. The air was clean after the rain and the world felt washed anew. Kaelan was waiting for her, a grim look on his face. Kaelan, the fight destroyed most of my stored supplies. And we need to know who else is sniffing around the edges of my territory. We hunt. Seraphina, an excellent suggestion. I'm feeling peckish. He shot her a look, a mix of annoyance and amusement. Kaelan, not for that. We hunt for game. And for information. Try to keep up. They moved through the forest as two different kinds of shadow. He was a force of nature, his steps sure and nearly silent on the damp earth, his senses attuned to every snapped twig, every scent on the breeze. She was a wraith, a whisper of movement that didn't disturb a single leaf, her eyes seeing in the deep gloom as if it were midday. For the first time they were not prey or saviors but partners. He stopped suddenly, holding up a hand. He pointed to a set of tracks on the ground. Kaelan, 400-pound buck. Moved through here less than an hour ago. The wind is in our favor. Walk where I walk. Don't make a sound. He began to move in a low crouch, his powerful form flowing through the undergrowth. Seraphina followed, her natural grace making it seem effortless, but the specific type of stealth needed for hunting game was new to her. She stepped on a dry branch and it snapped with a sound like a gunshot in the quiet woods. Sound of a loud twig snap. Kaelan froze, turning to glare at her. He moved back to her in an instant, his body pressing her back against the rough bark of an ancient oak. He was so close, his mouth was right beside her ear. Kaelan, a low, intense whisper. You move like a phantom in a ballroom, but like a clumsy child in the woods. Feel the ground. Don't just walk on it. Become part of it. Let the forest swallow your sound. His voice was a low rumble against her ear, sending a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the evening chill. His chest was a wall of solid heat against her back, one of his muscular thighs pinning her leg to the tree. He took her hand, placing it on the mossy earth. Kaelan, feel that? The dampness. Life. That is where you step. Silently. His lesson was practical, but the position was intimate, a teacher and his student locked in a predatory embrace. She could feel the steady, powerful beat of his heart against her back. He could smell the intoxicating scent of her hair, feel the subtle tremor that ran through her body at his proximity. The hunt for the deer was momentarily forgotten, replaced by a much more dangerous, much more thrilling hunt between the two of them. He lingered for a moment too long before pulling away, his jaw tight. The lesson was over, but the heat it had ignited between them lingered in the cool forest air. Chapter 8. Echoes of the Past. Their hunt for information led them to the northern edge of Kaelan's territory, to a place of stark, haunting beauty. A collection of stone ruins, remnants of a small settlement, stood on a windswept hill overlooking the valley. The stones were blackened and crumbling, being slowly reclaimed by nature. As they approached, a profound sadness emanated from Kaelan, a wave of cold grief that Seraphina could feel in her very core. Seraphina, what is this place? Kaelan, voice hollow. Home. Or what's left of it. This was an outpost of my pack. My first command. He walked through the ghosts of buildings, his hand trailing over a collapsed stone wall. He stopped in the center of what was once a common square, his gaze fixed on a small, gnarled tree that had somehow survived the destruction, growing up through the scorched earth. Seraphina, what happened here? Kaelan didn't answer for a long time. The wind whipped his dark hair around his face, his expression carved from stone. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw with a pain that time had not healed. Kaelan, a vampire raid. 15 years ago. It came without warning in the dead of night. They weren't soldiers. They were feral, rabid. Not fighting for territory just for the sake of slaughter. I was the alpha here. It was my job to protect them. He closed his eyes, the memory playing out behind them. Kaelan, though memories echoing. I had a mate. Her name was Lyra. She had a laugh that could make wildflowers grow. She fought by my side. I saw her fall. A vampire tore her throat out right there. Right where that tree now stands. I was fighting 2 others. I couldn't get to her in time. I failed. My rage. The beast, it took over completely. By the time my senses returned, every last vampire was torn to pieces. And so was my world. I left the Black Moon Pack that day. I couldn't bear their pity. I couldn't bear the title of Alpha when I had failed the one person I was sworn to protect above all others. Seraphina looked at this powerful, broken man, and for the first time she truly understood the depth of his solitude. It wasn't arrogance that drove him, it was a profound, suffocating guilt. The timeless hatred she had felt for his kind seemed petty and insignificant in the face of his personal agony. She stepped forward, her hand coming to rest on his arm. He flinched but didn't pull away. Seraphina. This was not a failure of strength, Kaelan. It was a tragedy of war. The burden of leadership is to carry the scars of those you lose. You have carried this one alone for too long. He looked down at her hand on his arm, then into her eyes. He saw no pity there. He saw understanding. He saw an ancient sorrow that mirrored his own. In that moment, surrounded by the ghosts of his past, he felt a flicker of peace, a connection he thought he had lost forever. He leaned in, not for a kiss, but for a moment of quiet solace, resting his forehead against hers, a silent acknowledgement of the comfort she had just offered. A comfort he never expected to receive from a vampire. Chapter 9. Whispers on the Wind. The fragile peace of their shared moment was shattered by a scent on the wind. Kaelan's head snapped up, his grief instantly replaced by the sharp-edged focus of the alpha. His lips pulled back from his teeth in a silent snarl. Kaelan, we're being watched. Oof. He moved to the edge of the ruins, his silhouette a dark, menacing shape against the twilight sky. Show yourself, Ronan, he called out, his voice booming across the hills. From the trees below, another werewolf emerged. He was younger than Kaelan, leaner, but with the same proud bearing of the Black Moon Pack. He shifted to his human form as he approached, his eyes full of a mixture of awe and apprehension. Ronan, Kaelan. The elders said you were dead. Kaelan, the elders are fools. What are you doing on my land? Ronan, the pack is uneasy. There are whispers of you. Of an alliance with a leech. Malachi's bounty has reached our lands. The pack alpha your uncle is considering collecting. For the good of the pack, he says. Kaelan, my uncle is a coward who values gold over blood. Tell him this is my territory now. The vampire is under my protection. Anyone who crosses that line will answer me. Ronan, be careful, Alpha. He is stirring the old hatreds. He speaks of your failure here. He uses it to poison them against you. Ronan bowed his head respectfully and retreated back into the woods, leaving a new layer of dread in the air. As if on cue, a shadow detached itself from a far-off tree and sped towards them, resolving itself into Seraphina. Her face was pale and grim. Seraphina, the wolves are not our only problem. I have my own, whispers on the wind. Malachi has grown impatient. He has hired a specialist. A vampire hunter named Valerius. He is known for his cruelty but more than that for his cunning. He does not hunt with silver and stakes. He hunts with secrets. He finds your weakness, your past, and turns it into a weapon to destroy you from the inside out. He is coming, Kaelan. And he is coming for us both. They looked at each other as the last of the light died. The world was closing in. Kaelan's past was being used as a weapon by his own kind, and a legendary hunter was now on their trail. Their isolated cabin was no longer a sanctuary, it was a target. And their forbidden bond was about to be tested by fire and blood. Chapter 10. The Heat of the Hearth. They returned to the cabin under a cloak of oppressive silence. The threats from the outside world, Ronan's warning, the news of Valerius, had cornered them, trapping them in the intimate space. The danger, instead of pushing them apart, acted like a forge, heating the air, melting away the last of their reservations. Kaelan built up the fire, the muscles in his back and arms flexing with the effort. Every movement was taut with contained energy. Seraphina watched him, a predator observing her equal. The fear of what was coming was a tangible thing, but beneath it, something else burned hotter. Desire. When he turned from the hearth, she was standing right behind him. Seraphina, they want to use your past against you. To break you. Kaelan, let them try. My past is a part of me. The scars are mine to bear. Seraphina, you don't have to bear them alone anymore. She reached up, her cool fingers tracing the edge of an old jagged scar on his chest, a relic from the battle that had taken Lyra. Her touch was not one of pity but of reverence. It was an acknowledgement of his pain and an acceptance of it. A growl rumbled deep in his chest, a sound that was not a warning but one of profound aching need. He captured her hand, his grip firm, and brought her palm to his lips, pressing a hot, searing kiss into its center. Kaelan, and you, a queen who wants to feel. Are you prepared for what this is? This isn't some polite courtly romance. This is primal. It's a storm. Seraphina, her voice a husky whisper. I have been sleeping for 500 years, Kaelan. It's time someone woke me up. I want to feel the storm. That was all the invitation he needed. He swept her up into his arms as if she weighed nothing and carried her to the thick bearskin rug before the fire. He laid her down gently, the firelight painting her skin in shades of gold and crimson. He loomed over her, a magnificent, wild thing, and the look in his eyes was one of pure, unadulterated possession. This time their kiss was not a desperate collision but a slow, deliberate claim. He explored her mouth with a burning intensity, learning her, tasting her. She answered with an equal fire, her hands roaming over the hard plains of his body, marveling at the strength, the heat, the sheer reality of him. Their clothes became an unwanted barrier, and were discarded with impatient hands. Bathed in the flickering light of the hearth, they were no longer a vampire and a werewolf. They were simply a male and a female, stripped bare of their titles, their history, their war. There was only the truth of their bodies and the undeniable call of their souls. His mouth trailed from her lips, down the long, elegant column of her throat, his teeth grazing the skin over her pulse point. She arched her back, a soft cry escaping her lips, offering him the very place his instincts screamed to tear, but his control was absolute. He was not there to harm but to worship. He showed her a passion that was fierce and untamed, yet tempered with a surprising tenderness. He memorized every inch of her with his hands and his mouth, awakening parts of her she thought had turned to dust long ago. She in turn met his wildness with a strength and an ancient wisdom that captivated him. She was no fragile flower but a raging fire, her passion a match for his own. They moved together in a rhythm as old as the moon, a dance of shadow and flame. It was a clash of worlds, a merging of night and wilderness, and in the heart of the fire's warmth, they found a connection so profound, it threatened to remake them both. It was not just passion. It was a branding, a soul-deep recognition that in this impossible forbidden union, they had finally truly come alive. Chapter 11. A Vampire's Weakness and Alpha's Strength. The first rays of dawn crept into the cabin, piercing the gloom like golden spears. For Kaelan the light was a balm, a source of strength. For Seraphina it was a poison. After their night of fierce passion she felt the familiar, inexorable pull of the sun's power, a lethargy that seeped into her bones, stealing her supernatural speed and strength, rendering her vulnerable. She stirred from the bearskin rug where they lay tangled together, a low groan of discomfort escaping her lips as a beam of light touched her foot. She recoiled as if burned. Kaelan was instantly awake, his protective instincts surging. He saw the weakness in her, the way she instinctively sought the deepest shadows of the room. This was the legendary queen of the night, reduced to a fugitive from the daylight. Without a word, he lifted her again, his arms strong and sure around her, and carried her to the windowless bedroom. He laid her on the simple cot, her body already curling in on itself as the sun's power grew. Seraphina, voice weak, strained. This is my curse, Kaelan. To be a creature of shadow. To be powerless while the world is awake. Kaelan, it is not a curse. It is a part of you, and I will guard it. He pulled a heavy blanket over her, tucking it around her shoulders. He then moved to the doorway, sitting on the floor and leaning his back against the frame, his powerful body blocking the entrance. A sentinel. An alpha guarding his den. The hours passed in a strange, peaceful silence. She could not sleep but drifted in a state of twilight consciousness, acutely aware of his presence just feet away. She could hear the steady rhythm of his breathing, feel the warmth of his body heat radiating into the cool, dark room. He did not leave. He did not eat. He simply sat, a silent, unmovable guardian. Seraphina, her voice soft in the darkness, tell me a story. Kaelan was startled, but his voice was low and steady when he answered. Kaelan, I don't know any stories. Only histories of battles and blood. Seraphina, then tell me one of those. Tell me about your first hunt. Your first shift. And so he did. In the dim, still air of the room, he spoke of the terror and exhilaration of his bones breaking and reforming, of seeing the world through a wolf's eyes for the first time, of the wild, inexplicable joy of running with his pack under the full moon. He spoke of a time before grief, before exile. And she, in turn, told him of her own transformation centuries ago. of the cold beauty of the vampire court in Vienna, of the loneliness of watching the world change and wither around her while she remained the same. In that dark room with the sun ruling the world outside, they shared the pieces of their souls they had never shown another. The Alpha became her strength, his presence a shield against her weakness. And the Queen, in her most vulnerable state, gave him a piece of her eternity, solidifying a bond that was no longer just about passion, but about profound, unconditional acceptance. Chapter 12. An Unlikely Alliance. As dusk began to settle, freeing Seraphina from her daylight torpor, the peace was shattered. A series of urgent, warning howls echoed from the perimeter of Kaelan's territory. Kaelan was on his feet in an instant, a low growl rumbling in his chest. "Kaelan, they're here. Too many. Not just wolves." They burst out of the cabin to see a nightmare unfolding. A group of at least a dozen vampires, clad in dark functional armor, were systematically moving through the woods. They moved with military precision, their leader a tall, imperious vampire with cruel eyes and a mocking smile. Valerius. With them were werewolves, not from the Black Moon pack but mercenaries, their fur mangy and their eyes glowing with a paid-for bloodlust. Kaelan and Seraphina were immediately back-to-back, a lone island in a sea of encroaching enemies. Valerius, voice smooth, like poisoned silk, the outcast queen and the disgraced Alpha. "Malachi sends his regards. He would prefer you alive, my lady, but he is willing to be flexible. As for the dog, he just wants the pelt." Before they could attack, a new series of howls erupted, this time from the west. It was Ronan. He burst through the trees not alone, but with half a dozen other younger wolves from the Black Moon pack. They formed a defensive line, placing themselves between Kaelan and Valerius's forces. Ronan, shouting to Kaelan, "Your uncle's greed has pushed us too far. The pack is not a band of assassins for hire. We follow the true Alpha." Valerius, "How touching. A family reunion. Kill them all." The forest exploded into a maelstrom of violence. It was a chaotic, desperate fight. Kaelan, in his full dire wolf form, was a whirlwind of black fur and righteous fury. Seraphina, a blur of impossible speed, weaved through the battle, her fangs and her daggers, which she had retrieved from her torn gown, finding their marks. But they were outnumbered. Valerius's forces were disciplined and relentless. Slowly, the small alliance was being pushed back towards the cabin. Ronan, grunting as he fought, "We can't hold them. There are too many." Kaelan, shifting back to his human form to issue commands, knew Ronan was right. A direct confrontation was suicide. They needed a plan. They needed to combine their strengths in a way the world had never seen before. Chapter 13. The Blood Pact. They had managed a fighting retreat back into the cabin, barricading the broken door. Outside, Valerius's forces were regrouping, content to lay siege. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of blood and fear. Ronan's small band of rebels looked at Kaelan for guidance, but their eyes kept darting nervously towards Seraphina. An alliance born of desperation was one thing. Trusting a vampire in a life-or-death battle was another. "Kaelan, they will attack again at moonrise. We need a strategy that isn't just brute force." Seraphina, her voice cutting through the tension, "Then we give them what they do not expect. We combine brute force with stealth. My speed, your power. I can move through their lines like a ghost, take out their support from the shadows while you and your wolves hit their front line with all the force of a tidal wave." One of the younger wolves scoffed. "Wolf One, and how do we know you won't vanish into the shadows and leave us to die, leech?" The insult hung in the air. Before Kaelan could snarl a reprimand, Seraphina held up a hand. She walked calmly to the center of the room, her regal gaze silencing the doubters. "Seraphina, you are right to question me. Words are meaningless now. We need an act of faith. An oath." She looked directly at Kaelan, her eyes filled with a fiery resolve. She drew one of her small, sharp daggers and, without hesitating, sliced a shallow cut across her own palm. Dark, almost black blood welled up. She then held the dagger out to Kaelan. Understanding dawned in his eyes. This was more than strategy. This was a ceremony. This was a binding. He took the dagger and made a similar cut on his own palm. Bright crimson blood flowed, a stark contrast to hers. In the stunned silence of the room, Seraphina stepped forward and clasped her bleeding hand to his. Where their blood mixed, a faint steam rose. For the werewolves, the scent was an impossible paradox. the life essence of their mortal enemy mingling with the blood of their alpha. For Kaelan and Seraphina, the connection was instantaneous and profound. A jolt of energy, of understanding, of shared life force, passed between them. He could feel a whisper of her ancient cold, her immortal patience. She could feel the wild, beating heart of his wolf, the warmth of his mortal soul. Seraphina, her voice ringing with power by my blood, I swear I will stand with the alpha of the black moon. His enemies are my enemies. His fight is my fight. Kaelan, his voice a deep, resonant oath by my blood, I swear the queen of the night is under my protection. An attack on her is an attack on me, on my pack. They released their hands. The oath was sealed. It was not magic, not in the traditional sense. It was a promise, made in the most sacred way their two species understood, through blood. The young wolves no longer saw a vampire. They saw their alpha's ally, a creature of immense power who had just bound herself to their cause. The fear in the room was replaced by a grim, unified determination. They were no longer just a vampire and a handful of werewolves. They were a pack. Chapter 14. The calm before the war. The hours before moonrise were a strange, tense calm. The allied wolves were outside, resting, sharpening claws and resolve, preparing for the coming battle. Inside the cabin, Kaelan and Seraphina stood alone. The weight of their oath, of the lives now depending on them, filled the small space. All the fire, the passion, the anger had been banked, leaving a quiet, powerful intimacy. He was checking the edge of a reclaimed axe. She was simply watching him, her arms wrapped around herself. Seraphina, I have never fought alongside another. Not truly. In my world, alliances are knives you keep pointed at your allies' back. Kaelan, in my world the pack is everything. Tonight, you are my pack. He put down the axe and walked to her. He didn't embrace her. Instead, he gently took her hand, turning it over to look at the now healing cut on her palm. He traced the line with his thumb, a touch more intimate than any kiss. Kaelan, are you afraid? Seraphina, for myself? No. I have faced death 1,000 times. But tonight, I find I am afraid for you. For your wolves. It is an unfamiliar and most unwelcome feeling. He gave her a small, grim smile. Kaelan, good. It means you're fighting for something more than just survival. He reached up and touched a lock of her dark hair, his gaze intense. Kaelan, if we survive this, what happens then? The world doesn't change overnight. You're still a vampire. I'm still a werewolf. Seraphina, I know. But perhaps we can carve out a small piece of this world for ourselves. A place where it doesn't matter what we are, only who we are. It was a fragile hope, spoken into the heart of a coming war. He leaned down and pressed a soft, lingering kiss to her forehead. It was not a kiss of passion but of promise. A promise to find her on the other side of the violence. Promise to try. Kaelan, find me when it's over. Seraphina, always. They stood like that for a long moment, two warriors on the precipice, drawing strength from each other's presence. Outside, the moon began to rise, full and blood-red, bathing the world in an eerie light. It was time. Chapter 15. The Battle at the Lake. The battle began not with a charge but with a whisper. As Valerius's forces advanced on the cabin under the blood-red moon, Seraphina slipped out a back window, a ghost in the night. She moved through the trees, a silent, deadly promise, picking off their rearguard one by one. When the front line realized their support was crumbling, Kaelan made his move. He burst through the barricaded door with a roar that shook the trees, his dire wolf form a terrifying spectacle of primal power. Ronan and the others charged with him, a wave of fur and fury. The battle proper began at the shore of the lake, the same place where this impossible story had started. Water and blood splashed under the crimson moonlight as the two forces clashed. Kaelan fought his way directly towards Valerius, who met him not with fear, but with an expert's cold calculation, wielding a silver-laced sword with deadly precision. Seraphina engaged the mercenary werewolves, her daggers a blur, her movements too fast for them to follow, her fighting style a deadly ballet. The alliance fought with a synergy that baffled their enemies. The wolves would create an opening with their brute strength, and Seraphina would exploit it with her speed. They were winning. Valerius, seeing the tide turning, let out a piercing whistle. From the far side of the lake, a new figure emerged, walking with an arrogant, regal stride. It was Malachi. Malachi, voice dripping with condescending fury. Seraphina. You would ally yourself with these mongrels against your own kind? You have disappointed me. Seraphina. You were never my kind, Malachi. You are a disease. A tyrant. And I am the cure. She launched herself at him, their personal battle becoming the vortex at the center of the larger conflict. Kaelan, meanwhile, finally cornered a bleeding Valerius. But as he lunged for the killing blow, Seraphina let out a cry of pain. Malachi had managed to land a blow, a deep cut on her side. Seeing her pain, Kaelan's focus wavered for a split second. It was all Malachi needed. He wasn't looking at Seraphina anymore. He was looking directly at Kaelan, a triumphant evil smile spreading across his face. Malachi, you fight so hard for her, little wolf. So noble. Just like you fought for your precious Lyra. Kaelan froze, his blood turning to ice. Kaelan, what did you say? Malachi, his voice a venomous whisper that carried across the battlefield. Oh, did she not tell you? Did you never wonder why that raid on your little settlement was so feral? So unlike a standard territorial attack? It wasn't a territorial attack, Alpha. It was an extermination. I was there. And I wasn't alone. Seraphina's eyes widened in horror, a forgotten memory, a suppressed truth rising to the surface. Seraphina whispering, horrified, no, it can't be. Malachi, I was there that night, hunting the beast who slaughtered my progeny. And who do you think was fighting right beside me, her fangs dripping with werewolf blood before she was made a queen? Tell him, Seraphina. Tell the mutt who helped me kill his mate. The story is far from over. What is the truth behind Malachi's claim? Can a love born from conflict survive a revelation forged in blood? Find out in the next installment of The Lone Alpha Saved the Outcast Vampire Queen by the Lake. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss a single heart-pounding chapter. Chapter 16. The Shattering Truth. Malachi's words fell into the heart of the battle like a drop of poison into a well, contaminating everything. The clash of steel, the snarls of combat, all of it faded into a muted roar in Kaelan's ears. There was only the ringing silence of betrayal. He stared at Seraphina, the chaos of the fight receding until she was the only thing in his universe. The woman he had held, the queen he had protected, the soul he had bared his own to. He saw her face, pale with horror, her eyes wide with a dawning, sickening recognition. It was the truth. He could see it in her. The beast within him, the one that had slept since Lyra's death, awoke with a violence that eclipsed all reason. It was a physical agony, a tearing in his chest as the blood pact, the sacred bond they had just formed, began to feel like a brand of shame, a chain linking him to his own personal hell. Kaelan, a choked, broken whisper. You. That single word was more devastating than any blow. It was an accusation, a verdict, and a damnation all in one. Seraphina tried to speak, to deny it, to explain, but her mind was a maelstrom of fragmented, blood-soaked memories she had buried for over a decade. A younger, more reckless vampire, eager to prove her worth, swept up in a campaign of vengeance led by a charismatic elder. She remembered the chaos, the snow, the scent of wolf blood, but she had never known the name of the place. She had never known whose world she had helped burn to the ground. Seraphina, voice trembling, full of self-loathing. I didn't know it was you. I know. Her words were meaningless, lost in the hurricane of his pain. Malachi laughed, a low, triumphant sound that sliced through the night. Malachi, ignorance is no absolution, my dear. The blood is still on your hands. Look at him. He sees it. He sees the monster you truly are. Ronan and his wolves faltered, their charge breaking apart as they felt the psychic agony of their alpha. They saw his focus shatter, his rage turn inward, his entire posture crumbling under the weight of a 15-year-old ghost. The battle had been won and lost in a single sentence. Valerius smiled, a thin, cruel curving of his lips, and signaled his forces. The hunter's instinct told him the prey was broken. It was time to close the trap. Chapter 17. A War on Two Fronts. Sound of the battle resuming with renewed ferocity, but now chaotic and one-sided. Kaelan lets out a roar of pure, undiluted agony. Kaelan's grief was a physical force. It erupted from him in a tidal wave of pure, uncontrolled fury. He shifted, his bones cracking and reforming not with the controlled power of an alpha, but with the explosive agony of a soul tearing itself apart. He was a monster once more, but this time his rage had no target. He launched himself forward, a black blur of claws and teeth, but he was not fighting with strategy. He was simply breaking things. He slammed into one of Malachi's vampire guards, tearing it to shreds, but it was a blind, desperate violence. Seraphina was frozen, paralyzed by the twin horrors of her resurrected guilt and the raw, tangible pain rolling off Kaelan. She was a queen of immense power, a warrior of centuries, but in that moment she was a ghost at the scene of her own crime. She barely registered one of Valerius's mercenaries swinging a heavy blade at her. She parried at the last second, her movements sluggish, her instincts dulled by shame. Seraphina vio her thoughts a desperate plea. Kaelan, please. Listen to me. It wasn't me. Not the me you know. I was lost, he twisted us all. But her thoughts could not reach him. He was lost in the red haze of his past. Ronan saw the disaster unfolding. His alpha, his inspiration, was fighting like a rabid animal, leaving himself open, his back exposed. The small band of black moon wolves was thrown into confusion. Their alliance was not just broken. It had become a liability. They were forced to defend their rampaging alpha while trying to fend off a disciplined and renewed attack. Valerius watched the chaos with the cool appraisal of a master tactician. He saw Kaelan's blind rage. He saw the wolves' confusion. And he saw Seraphina, her supernatural grace gone, replaced by a devastating vulnerability. He ignored the raging alpha. The true prize, the key to this whole battle, was the broken queen. Chapter 18. The Hunter's Gambit. Narrator. Valerius disengaged from the main fight, circling around the chaos with two of his most elite vampire guards. He moved with silent purpose, his eyes locked on Seraphina. She was fending off a werewolf, but her heart wasn't in it. Her eyes kept darting to Kaelan, her expression one of utter devastation. That distraction was the opening Valerius had been waiting for. He cornered her against a large boulder by the water's edge. He didn't raise his sword. He used a weapon far more potent, words laced with the poison of truth. Valerius, his voice a calm, cruel whisper, it's a pity really. To find a connection so powerful only to watch it rot from the inside out. He'll never forgive you. You must know that. Every time he looks at you he won't see the queen he desires. He will see his dead mate. You are a living monument to his greatest failure. Narrator. Every word was a dagger in her heart. He was right. She could feel it. The beautiful, fragile thing they had built was now a ruin, haunted by ghosts she had helped create. As she was reeling from his verbal assault, he made his move. It wasn't a lunge with a blade. His hand snapped out and from his sleeve shot a weighted chain, not of silver but of a dull black metal. It whistled through the air and wrapped around her arms and torso, pulling tight. The metal was cold but it burned. An unnatural weakness spread through her limbs instantly, a deep, cellular paralysis. Seraphina, a choked gasp, dead man's blood. Valerius, a clever concoction. So much more effective than simple silver. It doesn't just burn the skin, it deadens the soul. Kaelan, in the midst of tearing a mercenary wolf apart, heard her cry. His head snapped around. Through the red mist of his rage he saw her. He saw her fall to her knees, ensnared by the dark chain, Valerius standing over her like a triumphant collector. In that instant two forces waged a war within him. The monstrous, all-consuming hatred for the killer of his mate, and the fierce, primal instinct of an alpha to protect what was his. Love and hate, a storm that threatened to tear him in two. Malachi saw it all. He threw his head back and laughed, a sound of pure victory. The bond is strong, isn't it? Even when she is the monster from your nightmares. Take her, Valerius. The dog is broken. Chapter 19. An Alpha's Choice. Sound of a heart beating, slow and heavy, then speeding up into a frantic rhythm. A low, agonized growl. Narrator. For a single eternal second, Kaelan was frozen between two worlds. The past and the present. Vengeance and salvation. The ghost of Lyra, smiling in the sunlit square of his memory, screamed for him to let Seraphina perish, to avenge the past. But then another image forced its way through his grief. Seraphina standing in his cabin bathed in firelight, offering to share the burden of his scars. Seraphina, weak and vulnerable in the daylight, trusting him to be her shield. Seraphina binding her blood to his, swearing her loyalty to his fight. He saw not just the monster. He saw the queen. He saw his Seraphina. With a roar that was not of rage but of pure, unadulterated agony, he made his choice. He turned his back on Malachi. He ignored the path of vengeance that had defined his life for 15 years and charged across the battlefield, his singular focus now on Valerius, who was beginning to drag the paralyzed Seraphina away. Ronan, seeing the shift, seeing the clear purpose back in his alpha's eyes, let out a rallying howl. Ronan, for the alpha. Form a wall. The remaining Black Moon wolves, energized by his decision, threw themselves forward with renewed purpose. They crashed into Malachi's forces, creating a desperate living barrier of fur and claws, buying their alpha precious seconds. The fight between Kaelan and Valerius was not a battle of skill, it was a collision of wills. Valerius was a duelist, precise and deadly. Kaelan was a force of nature. Valerius's silver-laced sword sliced a deep, burning gash across Kaelan's ribs, but Kaelan barely felt it. He slammed into the hunter, his momentum carrying them both to the ground. He ripped the sword from Valerius's hand and with a savage snarl snapped the blade in two. He then grabbed the chain binding Seraphina and tore it apart with his bare hands. He stood over her motionless form, blood pouring from his side, breathing like a winded bull. He was wounded, exhausted and facing down the regrouping forces of Malachi and Valerius. But he was no longer broken. He was an alpha, guarding his territory, guarding his queen in a final agonizing act of faith. Chapter 20. The Unforgiven and the Unforgotten. Kaelan knew they couldn't win. To stay and fight was to die. He scooped Seraphina's dead weight into his arms, her head lolling against his shoulder. Her scent, even now, was a strange comfort amidst the pain. Kaelan voiced a ragged command. Ronan. Retreat. To the ruins. Scatter and regroup. Go. With a final desperate surge, Ronan and the wolves created a chaotic diversion, a whirlwind of feints and attacks that momentarily confused their enemies. It was enough. Kaelan turned and disappeared into the deep woods, his powerful legs eating up the ground, carrying his precious poisoned burden away from the battle. He didn't stop until he reached the windswept hill of the ruins, the graveyard of his old life. He stumbled into the center of the old square and gently laid Seraphina down on the cold earth, near the base of the small gnarled tree that marked Lyra's final resting place. The irony was a fresh wound, twisting the silver blade already lodged in his soul. As he stood over her, the paralytic poison began to recede from her system. Sensation returned with a painful tingling. Her eyelids fluttered open. The first thing she saw was Kaelan, his face a mask of unbearable pain, his shirt soaked with his own blood. He was looking at her, and the love she had seen in his eyes was still there, but it was drowning in a sea of unforgivable betrayal. Seraphina, a broken whisper. Kaelan. Narrator. Before he could answer, a new voice, calm and powerful, spoke from the shadows of a collapsed wall. Voice. It is not her you should hate, son of the Black Moon. An old, powerfully built she-wolf emerged into the moonlight. Her fur was streaked with gray, but her eyes were sharp and full of an ancient authority. Kaelan stared, his breath catching in his throat. Kaelan. Elara? It can't be. You died in the fire. Elara. The rumors of my death were convenient. Malachi lied to you, child. Or rather, he only told you the part of the truth that would serve him. There is more to the story of that night. A reason the queen was there. A reason her memory of the event is a shattered ruin. She was not there as his ally. She was there as his prisoner. Kaelan and Seraphina both stared at the elder, a single impossible flicker of hope igniting in the ashes of their despair. Meanwhile, back at the lake, Malachi stood watching the distant hill, a satisfied smile on his face. Valerius approached, his expression sour. Valerius, you let them escape. Malachi, do not be so short-sighted, hunter. Wounds of the flesh heal. I have given him a wound of the soul. Let him run. Let him listen to old wives' tales. The true poison was never in your chain. It is in the sliver of truth I gave him. He will never fully trust her again. Their bond is tainted forever. The game has just become so much more interesting. Is this a new beginning or the final cruel twist of the knife? Can a love built on a battlefield survive a war of memory and lies? The final confrontation is coming. Don't miss the epic conclusion to The Lone Alpha Saved the Outcast Vampire Queen by the Lake. Like, comment and subscribe and prepare for the storm.